Hello, everyone. This is Dr. George Gonzalez. I'm the founder of Quantum Neurology and the author of the Holographic Healing Series, as well as the Holographic Number Theory. And here today, I have a special friend, Dr. James Sheen. He's going to be one of our speakers at the year-end conference we have November 11th and 12th, our Quantum Neurology Homecoming event. And I'm so excited to have everybody hear about what he's talking about and what he's sharing. He's going to be talking about the neurologic short circuits. Thank you so much, James, for being here.
Well, thank you very much. It's a rarefied group of people that get to stand and have a conversation, and you get to hang out with some of the really brilliant horsepower of the chiropractic profession, and then stepping it up to that higher level, taking the nervous system mastery of quantum neurology to the cranial nerves, and to the sensory rehabilitation component that has eluded most people previously. The talk that we kind of wound up coming to a conclusion to what to talk about was, we kind of called it the short circuit. In the quantum neurology worlds, the technical term is the gap. And we're going to have, hopefully we can get some video tied in with a couple of patients that Katinka has, and some of the video that you shot when you came out. I think it was 4 years ago when I was looking, and we were having the discussion about sometimes it's only when you take an item and you go all the way down the rabbit hole. When you go down and start following that thread, you start pulling the thread, do we see what actually happens to a patient? And it sounds really simple in the classroom when they say, well, oh, this is the point of interruption. This is where the circuits is getting snipped, and we're no longer maintaining that connection. But we have had a couple cases recently and in the past that were the little life lessons for me as a practitioner. And the part that made it interesting was fundamentally, this is what we had to do. We just never saw it as that big of an issue, because only when you take it to the full expression can we have a person that was unable to sustain themselves as a person, because they were unable to work, they couldn't stay focused. They would the one was actually documented as not having seizures, but he would lock up so intensely that they would, if they shut the lights off in a restaurant, he'd lock up for 20 minutes. They'd have to turn the lights on or cart him outside. And he's back working, participating, living, working, playing grandpa, and catching balls with his boys.
And just to describe what you're talking about a little bit, because I saw this person personally, it's a overstimulation of the nervous system. So too much stimulus, and each person's different, but too much stimulus and this person would lock up and would only be able to move very slowly. And it was amazing to see it in action. And you know, when finding the stressors that are triggering these things, Dr. James was able to help, you know, as he's describing, make these connections for his nervous system so that his nervous system would respond appropriately to the stressors that are being placed on it. Go ahead, James, I'm sorry.
And so if we're going to talk about that short circuit or that breaker that was that popped, in his case, he couldn't reboot it, or it would take enormously long periods of time. So it's a little bit of a tale from the trenches of how to get there. In this case, it's been a marathon, but a quite rewarding race to see him the part that was the most rewarding, I think, was when he brought me and he showed me his driver's license, because he had his driver's license reinstated, because now he didn't have to take and worry about how he was going to get to work or get there or have somebody pick him up.
Amazing. Amazing. And what part of the rehabilitation would you say was the biggest issue neurologically speaking? Like, what was the breakdown that was causing this kind of a neurological reaction?
The part that made the biggest shift in his case was I'm going to call it the association, and for lack of a better term, that's the best way to word it, was that you have to make neurologic recognition, and you have to take and make that correction when that happens. We would watch him go through this cycle, and eventually his body would take and get there and reset that breaker. That short circuit would be reintegrated. But when you take and you make the correction and make that, in this case, it was a manual adjustment at that level of the gap, then it was like, in his words, he's like, just bam. He's like, well, back at the Bat Cave. I mean, it was just like, bam, the lights are on and everybody's home. And he's like, you know, what the hell happened? And then we did it, and then we did it more, and then we built upon the layers. We picked up, and we got a little more animated. We got a little more levels of resolution. You started off as simple, and you started layering the stresses. But that's and with Katinka's person, you know, there was two portions that I was fortunate to bring to the table with my expertise to help her patient. We actually talked to her mom about some other stuff, but she went 2 weeks without a seizure.
Now, could you describe, you know, because I know what you're talking about, but for those people that aren't familiar with the case, could you describe what happened when this woman was exposed to electricity?
So Katinka sent me a video clip, a little short video clip of a lady that's young. Her name is Jess. I think she graduated high school, so I'm not quite sure how old she is. But if you brought her even remotely close into the presence of an arthrostim, into an electromagnetic spectrum, she would start to have seizures, and she was getting close to 80 a day.
Wow.
So she couldn't do or sustain. It was too tough on her to do most of anything, and some of the microcurrent, some of the just being in a room full of people would trip this response that her nervous system had. And she sent me the deal, and I said, well, I think you could do that. And so I was trying to explain it to her, and she said, how about you work on her? And, you know, I said, I was excited. I thought it'd be kind of fun, because when it's your skill set, when you know how to do it, you can do it. I've been fortunate. I didn't have to practice on her. I've gotten to practice on other people. And,
you know, that's the thing, because I remember when I saw the case, I had to leave town suddenly, and you know, you and I were going to work on the case together, but you ended up taking over on it. And it was an amazing thing, because I said, hey, this is a lot like that other case that you worked with that we were just talking about, but it was expressing itself differently.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's part of the presentation for what we're going to talk about is sometimes you need to see that full level of expression. What really happens when you go down that rabbit hole? How big is the rabbit hole, and the vastness of where we're playing? because it's big. And then the, uh, the the location of finding that neurologic short circuit within the cranial vault, the targeting system, if you want to call it that, that goes with the cranial gap, that I'll be talking about also, to take and pick it to that higher level.
And that's really exciting because that has so many applications, and from concussion to speech therapy to all sorts of facial and trigeminal neuralgia, all sorts of rehabilitation concepts could go in through that idea. Now, people might not understand that quantum neurology is a strategy. It's a strategy of rehabilitation with some very specific step-by-step processes to help restore function, or that's the goal, is to restore function. And these are rehabilitation strategies. They're neurological exercises that we use in corporation with light therapy to achieve these type of results that we're talking about. And again, it comes down to knowing how to evaluate the nervous system and then how to apply these strategies to rehabilitate the functions that are not doing the level of function that they're supposed to. So, could you speak to that idea, James, about, how you apply the principles to the case and how that could translate across patient to patient for you?
What we, I call it kind of an offshoot, or maybe it's just me being a little bit of a Nebraska boy, but you created one of the brain calm, and you have to take it and kind of help link the cranial vault and those events. But imagine the other one that you use is the gap. So you're setting down and you're scanning the spine or an extremity, because you'll find it on an extremity, you'll find it on a wrist or an elbow or a shoulder, where that's the spot that has the greatest amount of resistance, and that's where the weak link per se snapped. And when I'm working on somebody, the thing that I found was that on occasion it was a very, very, very particular spot. And so the how to take and both this Woody Beck is so much fun, because Woody always gets excited, and the faster that you go, the more excited he gets. And in this case, the ability to go a little bit faster is actually because you have a faster way to get a higher level of detail, and picking that as the spot than to do the brain calm. But a lot of times, just imagine, as we would sweep the body looking for these points of interruption, what if the interruptions are actually in the cranium? That's where your cranial nerves are at. How are we going to take and then start linking those points back together so that we have no longer the dysfunction, or start rehabilitating and toughening the nervous system so it can withstand the stresses of life?
It's a powerful idea when we start recognizing where the nervous system short circuits. And oftentimes it's, people will say, oh, it's that spot that I've, had adjusted many times, but it just doesn't go away. It's this common short circuit that occurs. And sometimes it happens on multiple levels of the spine or throughout the body, but very commonly within the spine. And it's about understanding how to test the nervous system, and then against these spots which we find in the body, which we call gaps. And when we find these gaps, we find an immediate switch in neurological function. And so we know, well, that's where the short circuit occurs. That's where the connection has to be made. And so these are the concepts that we've put together in quantum neurology that are unique and deliver the results that we're known for. Yeah. Is that right, Dr. James?
And that's what gets you excited, because that's what you do on Monday after you go to the class and you learn it, and you get you told me this a long time ago, that you're trying to build a vocabulary so that we can have this conversation. Because if you'd sit down and you'd say to somebody 120 years ago, there's a car, and you're going, what? Or you'd sit down and say, well, look at that plane fly. Well, what's a plane? That didn't exist. I had a patient, she was my last patient that was born in the 1800s. She was born in 1898. She was
Wow.
too young for World War I, and she was too old for World War II. And she goes, she was always very proactive. She made it to 104, and she was sharp. But she goes, yeah, she goes, oh, well, I call it this because that's what they used to call them, because we didn't have a word for that back in the day. And you took and you created a language, and then we get to sit down and have that fun conversation, because the people that are part of this community, you have to, because it's a unique experience that we like to share with new people so that they can understand and translate. But that was also the conversation that when we got back from July to the, what was it, the top, I can't think of the word for the one in July.
The module 4 cranial nerve.
Yes. So that's one. When we were sitting there, I'm going, everybody wants to take, and but I said, my first language was QN.
Yeah.
So I have to translate everything else through it.
And
that's how I
you've
think.
really thrived. You've really changed and thrived and blossomed through QN. You know, you were much more reserved, I'll say, when I first met you.
Yeah, that's polite putting it. But it's been quite a ride. It's been a lot of fun, and you know, I think we're just starting to hit our stride as a technique, and as a across the board. I think you're just hitting a stride.
You know, I agree, James, and with you, it's like you have your other projects that you've taken on that are absolutely amazing, and the things that you've been able to do since learning quantum neurology, and it's been powerful. It's been empowering to watch. And what would you say to other doctors? You know, because you're practicing quantum neurology on a very high level, but everything you do is based in the foundations that are taught in, you know, the basics of quantum neurology. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Master Edward Chauvin said one time, he goes, I love QM. He goes, and if I found something that was better, I would do it tomorrow. Because he goes, I only want to bring the best to my patients. But I haven't seen anything better yet. Katinka called me a purist. She said, well, you're a bit of a purist. And I didn't think about it as me being a purist, but I think that I am. But I also haven't seen a need to take and go past sensory rehabilitation, visceral work, and cranial nerves. Because I think if you give it just a bit of time, if you give it just a bit of work, on occasion we may need to have facilitations, and we bring in people for the other things that aren't in our skill sets. But yeah, if I saw something better, I would jump on the wagon. But from the standpoint of where we're at, the only thing I've added in the last was the NET to get into the emotional component. But even that, it still winds up, can they handle the stressors? Can they handle light touch? Can they handle deep touch? What happens with their nervous system? Because honestly, the emotional component still has to be manifested. And the problem is that they can't manifest it. They can't have you. I was telling a story today about a lady that a couple of years ago we created, and I was talking about the sensory visceral cords,
Right.
and that work continues. I've added a couple more. It's been a ball, and for lack of a better word, she was a dour, sour old lady. She wasn't very happy, and I I shouldn't laugh, but I just sat down and I said, I want you to take, and we're going to work on this a little bit today. And so she fired the myotomes in the order that I told her. And then I told her to smile, and she screamed. She screamed. She screamed loud enough that they heard her out in the waiting room.
Wow.
You would have thought that she got hit by a fencer. And the fundamental is that I don't know when was the last time the lady smiled and laughed. And it was physically painful for her, like somebody hit her with electricity, to take and actually do that.
Wow.
Creating function.
And therefore she never did it. And the emotional repercussions of that, you know.
Maybe, but she could have never took and expressed the happiness or dealt with it, because she didn't actually have the motor skills to deal with it.
Wow.
Implement it.
Wow. Amazing.
I mean, that was a fun. That one kind of made the hair on your arm stand up a little bit.
Well, you know, this and many, many, many more stories. We could stay on for hours and hear more amazing stories that Dr. James has had the ability to be a witness to, using quantum neurology as his tool of choice. And, you know, Dr. James, thank you so much for being with us. And there may be people out there that may need your help. How would they get a hold of you? How would they come in to see you?
Of course, we're listed on the quantum neurology webpage underneath the doctor locator. I'm in Kearney, Nebraska. The office phone number is area code 308-236-2134. If you have a question, or if you have want to pick my brain a little bit on some of the business side of how and patient applications of the quantum neurology household, then give me a ring.
Well, thank you so much, James. It's always a pleasure to talk with you. And again, Dr. James is going to be sharing more at our homecoming event, our quantum neurology homecoming event, November 11th and 12th of 2016. That's a Friday and Saturday. Everyone's welcome. Doctors are welcome. Spouses are welcome. Staff welcome to come to this event, see what's going on with quantum neurology and what we're doing. For more information, please contact us at info@quantumneurology.com. That's info@quantumneurology.com. Thank you so much, James, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you much. You have a good evening. Love to everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.